12 jurors present, 2 alternates are present. Ladies and gentlemen, as you know, before you break, the people rested, and the court, we all had some legal issues to discuss. We're prepared now to present the defense case. Defense is prepared. As you recall, at the beginning of opening, Mr. Hsiung reserved his opening, so he is going to present his opening statement, plus move into some witnesses at this point. Mr. Hsiung?
Your Honor, permission to move the podium?
You may.
Oh, yeah, I'm grab it.
Members of the jury, rescuing sick and dying animals is not a crime. My name is Wayne Hsiung, and
Improper argument, Your Honor.
Let's move on.
thank you.
The objection is sustained. Go ahead and move on.
I'm an attorney for Alexandra Paul. I think you met me previously. My name is Wayne Hsiung. You've now heard from the state. You're going to hear from the defense. And this is an odd case for a lot of reasons. First, let's just get out of this way. My client is an actress who did star in a television show called Baywatch. We all know this. You'll hear more about this shortly. Another reason this case is odd is this is a petty theft case, and there are a lot of lawyers involved. But the main reason this is a strange case, even for me, is because the key evidence of the quote-unquote alleged crime came from the defendants themselves. Indeed, we wouldn't be in the courtroom today if not for the fact that the defendants served up on the platter all the evidence the state is now using against them. And that will continue in court this week. You're going to hear directly from the defendants themselves about what they did and why. But what this evidence will show is not that they committed a theft. What they were doing was undertaking a rescue.
Objection.
I'm going to break in.
Improper argument, violation, motion eliminate.
Your Honor, I was saying what the evidence will show.
Objection, we'll rule for now.
Thank you. I'm going to break this evidence down into 3 pieces to make it easier to remember. I'm calling it 2 no's and a yes, just so you can remember in your deliberations. The first no is no intent. Remember a conversation during jury selection about the why? It's not just what they did, but why. The evidence in this case will show that these women had no intent to deprive Foster Farms of anything of value. Why were they there? Their intent was simply to give aid to animals they believed were suffering. And they did so with a good faith belief that they had a legal right to do what they were doing. Second no is no value. The evidence will show that these birds had no intrinsic value to Foster Farms or to anyone else. These were sick and dying birds who were a liability to the company and if sold to a consumer, a danger to the public. And the third piece might be the most important piece because it is what this case is actually about. Because no, this case is not about the elements of theft. This case is ultimately about, and the facts will show that this case is about their attempts to rescue a sick and dying living being. So let's start with the first, no intent. The prosecution, as you heard, has a burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendants had a specific and criminal intent. What you will hear in our evidence is that neither of the defendants had this intent at all. In fact, their only intent was to aid animals they believed were suffering from criminal animal abuse by Foster Farms. To help you understand, think of a dog in a hot car. Breaking into a car to steal a dog is theft. But breaking into a car because the car is hot and the dog is dying of heat exhaustion is not theft because your intent is different. Why you're doing what you're doing.
Objection, improper argument.
The evidence will show.
Okay, I'm sorry. The objection is sustained, but move on.
Okay. The evidence will show that this was the defendant's intent, not to steal, but to help. How are we going to show this? Well, first, you're going to hear testimony that these women had a long-standing concern about criminal animal cruelty at Foster Farms. And you'll hear evidence they tried every way possible to get the company and the authorities to do the right thing, the lawful thing, and protect these animals from cruelty. And after everything had failed, their intent was simply, and they were compelled to help. And that's what they did. They ran up to a truck, they saw two birds sick and struggling to stand, and they took them to receive veterinary care. That's it. That's all they did. And what it will not show is that they had the intent to take anything of value from foster farms. To the contrary, what the evidence we present will show is that their intent was to aid an animal who was suffering and do right. In short, their intent was not to do something wrong, it was to do something right. What's going to make their intent even more clear, however, is what they did after the rescue. And in particular, they didn't hide it. In fact, they told everyone who would talk to them about everything they had done. This includes the very video the prosecution has played. This video was only posted on social media because the defendants consented to it and said, go ahead, put our names up. Because we believe people should see what Foster Farms is doing. It includes media outlets, and you'll hear testimony about their conversations with media outlets like the New York Times about their concerns about criminal animal abuse at Foster Farms. And here's the most important point. Here's the most important point. Their openness even included the authorities. Their organization contacted the authorities both before their action and after their actions with a criminal animal cruelty complaint drafted with the assistance of a former federal prosecutor. These women's openness showed they did not have criminal intent because they intended to commit a prohibited act. If they intended to commit a crime, why would you tell everyone about it, including the authorities? Right? So that's the first point, no intent. Move on to the second point, no value. You heard, the prosecution has a burden to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these two chickens had some intrinsic value, however slight. The evidence will show you, however, that these chickens not only lacked value, they were a liability. What is some of this evidence? You'll hear evidence from witnesses who observed the animal's condition immediately after they were rescued, who will tell you that these birds were so sick they were shocked that either of them survived. They couldn't walk, they couldn't reach food and water, they couldn't even move away from their own excrement. That's how sick they were. And when a bird or animal is too sick to walk, she is too sick for a consumer to eat. That is not a bird with any intrinsic value to anyone, but especially a company like Foster Farms. But it's not just the observations of ordinary witnesses of the condition of the animals that you will hear in our evidence. You're also going to hear testimony from an expert witness, namely a veterinarian who was consulted at the time in September 2021 about the condition of these two birds, and who has seen, over her 10 years in veterinary practice dealing with farm animals, thousands of animals from commercial farms. And this expert witness, Dr. Kirsten Rosenberg, is an expert in animals who have no value to the industry because she treats animals who have been abandoned precisely because they're too sick, they're too injured, or they're just growing too slow to have any value. She spent the last 10 years of her life handling these valueless animals, and you are going to hear her expert opinion, first made in September 2021, and again in court, about the condition of these animals. And what did she conclude? She concluded back in 2021, and she will conclude again in the testimony we present to you, that these animals were a liability to Foster Farms for two very important reasons. First, not only were these birds sick, but they were sick with diseases that could spread through the entire flock and cause, and here's the term, remarkable economic losses to the entire company. Second, not only were these birds sick with diseases that could spread through the entire flock, they had diseases that were dangerous to consumers like you and I. She will tell you about a list of diseases that these birds had that will make your head spin and make you terrified to eat chicken from Foster Farms. And that is not intrinsic value. That is a liability. But it's not just one veterinarian. You will hear evidence that the nation's foremost veterinary school in handling livestock, the University of California, Davis, reached exactly the same assessment as Dr. Rosenberg. In fact, you will hear evidence that UC Davis concluded that these animals had a disease, a coronavirus, that, quote, causes remarkable economic losses to the industry. A coronavirus that infects 100% of the birds who come into contact with it. A coronavirus that kills up to 60% of the birds, 3 out of 5. remarkable economic losses. 60% of the birds dying, 100% who come into contact with these birds coming sick. But maybe more importantly, you will hear evidence from UC Davis that these birds had infectious diseases that were extraordinarily dangerous to human beings, including one infection that kills up to 66.7% of human hospital patients infected with it.
Objection to proper argument.
I'm
Sustained.
previewing the evidence. All this evidence will show you definitively that these birds did not have any intrinsic value, not even a slight amount. These birds were a liability. They could cause, quote, remarkable economic losses to the industry. They were a danger to consumers.
Objection to
They
proper
had-
argument again.
Your Honor, I'm previewing the evidence that they're going to hear.
Well, there's an objection that it's an improper argument.
The objection is sustained.
So what the evidence will show, these women, frankly, did Foster Farms a favor by taking sick birds out of the human supply chain.
Objection, improper argument again.
Okay, I'll allow the statement.
Thank you. So let's bring us to the third point. I told you a little about what the evidence will not show. No intent, no value, right? Now let's move on to what the evidence will show. Because yes, the evidence will show that something very important happened on September 28, 2021. What will show you, and what the evidence will prove to you, I think convincingly, is that this was not a theft. It was a rescue. What is some of this evidence? Well, first, we're going to provide testimony that rescue is part of Alexandra Paul's DNA as a human being. She didn't just play a lifeguard on Baywatch. She saves lives in real life. This is a woman who has spent her entire life helping others. Even when she was a famous actress on Baywatch, she went and got emergency medical technician training. She still carries around a medication to this day called Narcan in case she runs across someone who's dying of a drug overdose. She spends much of her time away from her work as an actor at soup kitchens and shelters, helping human beings in need. This is not someone who steals from people. This is someone who rescues people. And you will hear testimony that includes non-human animals. Many years ago, you'll find out that my client was awakened to the suffering of animals. She read about gentle creatures being brutalized in slaughterhouses, being torn to pieces, alive. And she couldn't take it. She knew she had to help them. You hear that in September 2021, shortly before she acted to rescue these two birds, she learned about grotesque animal cruelty happening at Foster Farms, including animals being, quote, neglected and mutilated, and animals being, quote, scalded alive because the company was moving the slaughter line too fast and cutting too many costs. And the evidence will show that she tried every means possible to try and stop this unlawful cruelty. She took in sick and injured animals herself. She reported to the government that these things were happening and lobbied the government to enforce the animal cruelty laws against big corporations. She even begged the company, please show kindness to these poor creatures who have given us so much. But you will hear evidence that none of these things worked at all, none of them. And after seeing so much unspeakable cruelty and violence against vulnerable creatures who had no one else to protect them, only after all that, she decided she had to do what her mom taught her to do. What she believed she had a right to do and a duty to do in her heart of heart, which is help living beings who were in need. And as a jury, the evidence will show that action, helping living beings in need, that action is not a crime. I believe when you see this evidence, you'll agree. You'll acquit both defendants of the charges against them. And you will find that the evidence shows that this was not a rescue. This is not a theft. This was a rescue. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. The defense may call their first witness.
Thank you. Your Honor, we will call Alicia Santurio.
All right.
Judges that are never for the court should be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help me God. Yes. Thank you.
Ma'am, state your full name and spell your last name, please.
Alicia Santurio, Santurio.
Thank you. Mr. Carraway, your witness.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Ms. Santurio, I'm going to come right on asking. September 28th, 2021, did you rescue a bird you called Ethan from a transport truck outside of the Foster Farm slaughterhouse?
Yes, I did.
Now, have you ever denied that?
No.
Have you been open and public about that?
Yes, I have.
How so?
We recorded the rescue, and shortly after the rescue took place, we posted it on social media, maybe like an hour or so after.
Okay. Why did you rescue Ethan from that transport truck?
I rescued Ethan because I knew he was suffering, and I knew there were birds that were suffering on that truck.
Did you think, given the conditions you saw, that your conduct was lawful?
Yes.
I'm going to come back and ask you a little bit more about that in a moment, but first I want to take a step back and ask you a little bit about yourself. Where do you currently live?
I live in the Bay Area.
Okay. And who do you live with?
I moved back with my parents. My mom is taking care of my grandma who has pretty bad dementia. It's a lot of work, so I moved back and I help them take care of her.
Did you grow up here in California?
Yes.
Okay. And in addition to assisting your mom take care of your grandmother with dementia, what do you do?
I work for an organization, Direct Action Everywhere.
Okay. What do you do with Direct Action Everywhere?
With Direct Action Everywhere, I help do investigations, and last November I joined the legal team, and I work as like a paralegal legal assistant for their legal team.
And what type of organization is Direct Action Everywhere?
We're a nonviolent animal advocacy organization.
Okay. And how did you get involved with animal advocacy?
I've always loved animals my whole life, and it was about 10 years ago. I was just feeling like I wanted to do more and help more, and it was actually my mom who told me, she's like, why don't you find like an animal advocate group to, help out with, and so I did a little Googling, and I found Direct Action Everywhere was having a meeting, and I went to the meeting, I liked what I heard, and been a member ever since.
Okay. Have you ever otherwise worked with animals?
Yes, I have.
Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, I used to work at an animal sanctuary. It was a rehab and it was a rehabilitation and adoption center. And we would take in all sorts of farm animals that needed homes, but what we mainly did was we would do these large-scale rescues of chickens. So the sanctuary worked with farmers who had egg-laying farms, and when the farmer was getting ready to depopulate, which is just like a nice word for kill, their flock, they would let Animal Place come in and rescue as many chickens as we could, and so it was normally about like 2,000 to 1,500 chickens at a time, and we would do this like 2-3 times a year.
And how long did you work there?
I worked there for like about 2 years.
Okay, and you already talked a little bit about the number of birds, but I want to ask you a little bit more pointedly. During your years there, how many chickens do you think you cared for?
Like over 10,000.
And
Many chickens.
I'm sorry. What would you say your primary role there was?
I was an animal caregiver. So I would we would clean the barns every morning, if you can imagine, having 2,000 hens. There would be like several hundred in 4 different barns. It gets very messy, so every morning we would clean the barns. But also, my really important role there was I was doing animal care. And working there, I noticed that I actually had like some special gift for chickens. I don't know why. I had never spent much time with chickens before, but I was really good at giving care to chickens. So I would have to go into these barns and identify hens that were sick and needed to be taken out of the main population and taken to our animal care room.
Okay. And you had mentioned that you had never really worked with chickens before this experience. Was there any specific experience during your time at Rescue Ranch that really stuck out with you with your connection with chickens?
Yeah, there were many, but one that I remember is a hen that I ended up adopting, and she came home with me. Her name was Brutus. And so like I said, I would go in the barns and every day make sure I was assessing the health of the chickens. And so one day I noticed that there was a hen. This was just like a couple days after the rescue. I noticed there was this hen and her face was like all bruised and scabbed. And I was like, oh no, I thought, oh, the other hens are picking on Brutus. And so I sat back and I watched to see what was happening. I stayed in the barn for a little while. And then I noticed that it wasn't the other hens picking on Brutus. It was actually Brutus was like picking fights with all the other hens. And she was much smaller than the other hens. And I think she was just like so traumatized from being in the cages. They came from a battery cage farm. But so from being in the cages for 2 years, that when she got out, she was just like fighting with everyone. So we had to pull her out of the barn, and we kept her in the animal care room for a little while. And being in the animal care room, it's, you know, it's not that fun. It's kind of boring. They're just like in a kennel. So I would go on my breaks and, excuse me, I'd go on my breaks and hang out with her. And I would take her outside with me, and she'd always like walk right next to me. Or if I was sitting down, she'd sit like right behind my back. And like we just developed this really strong bond, and she felt real safe with me. So then after doing that for a little while, I would take her down when I was cleaning the barns. And Rescue Ranch was like a big open property with 4 barns on it. So I would clean the barn, and then I felt safe enough to leave her in the open, like just in the open field, because she just really trusted me. And what was super cute about this story is, so she'd hang out, she'd wait for me to finish the barn, and then when I was walking to the next barn, I'd be like, come on Brutus, let's go. And she like learned her name, and she'd just follow me just like a little dog, and yeah, it was so cute. And so of course, you know, I had to adopt her.
Sounds like that experience had a profound impact on you.
Yes, it did.
You also mentioned you worked with sick chickens at Rescue Ranch. Do you mind if I ask approximately how many sick chickens you worked with?
Hundreds.
Can you tell me about sort of the care and work you did with particularly the sick population of chickens?
Well, how we would care for them?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So it depends on what they had. So if it looked like they needed antibiotics, say they had a respiratory infection, if we heard sneezing or there was nasal discharge, we'd give them antibiotics. We'd give them pain meds. A lot of them would get bumblefoot, which is when they get like something embedded in their foot and it gets swollen and infected. We would like do a little surgery, take that out. They would get prolapses, so we would treat their prolapse, just all sorts of different things.
Okay. And was part of your role identifying which birds needed medical care or sick?
Yes.
Can you tell us about how you would do that?
Yeah, so like I said, I would scan the flock, but so there's a few ways to quickly and easily assess a chicken's health. And one way is like looking at their comb quality.
And what's a comb?
A comb is the little red pokey thing or spiky thing on their heads. That's a comb.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so it should be bright red. If the comb is like dark purple or pale or yellow, something like that's a good sign there's something wrong with that hen. So I would, I'd scan, look at comb quality, look at feather quality. If my boss, I was really good at this, my boss used to joke and say I was so good that I could spot a prolapse from the front. Prolapse,
I think we can pick it up.
I wasn't sure.
Sure. So safe to say, it sounds like you have a lot of experience identifying sick birds.
Yes.
You mentioned respiratory illnesses. Did you have any experience with birds that had infectious bronchitis virus?
Yeah, yes, I did.
Can you tell the jury about that experience?
So we did a smaller rescue. Like I said, we had the 4 barns. So we had 3 barns that still had hens from a previous rescue. So we had 1 barn that we could fit 500 hens in. And a farmer contacted us and said, I'm going to depopulate. Do you want any of my hens? So we were like, yeah, we'll come get 500. This is a farmer we had never worked with before. So when we went, we got the chickens, and then when we got back to Rescue Ranch that night, we noticed immediately something was wrong. You could tell immediately these hens were sick. But so at Rescue Ranch, when hens would die, we would always take them to UC Davis to get a necropsy. So it must have been the next day, a couple days, a hen died. And so we took her to UC Davis, and we found out she had infectious bronchitis virus.
And what was the significance of that for you and your work?
So it's highly, highly contagious. Hsiung mentioned some statistics about IBV, and we were really quite terrified because we had other hens on the property, and it could travel on your clothes, on like the rakes you use if you use it in a barn. It could just travel, and then all the hens at the property could get sick.
Okay. And what did y'all do with a flock of birds that might have infectious bronchitis virus?
So there was plans. We were gonna euthanize the 500 hens. It was really sad and really a dark time. But thankfully, one of Animal Place's major donors heard about this happening at the sanctuary, and he knew how much me and my coworkers loved the animals and cared for the animals. So he actually bought a separate property next to Animal Place and built a barn so that those 500 hens could go and live quarantined on that property and live out their lives. So thankfully, we didn't have to euthanize them all.
And you mentioned getting a necropsy. Is that something that, through your rescue ranch, was something you commonly did when the bird passed away?
Yes, we always want to know, what's going on. Why are they dying? Yeah.
Okay. And sort of taking your experience with Rescue Ranch and sort of getting the necropsy, did you carry that experience? Would you rely on it when you were outside of that transport truck on September 28th, 2021, rescuing Ethan?
Yes.
Okay. And we'll come back to that in just a moment. Do you have chickens at home?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Now, I want to sort of next direct your attention towards foster farms generally. How did you first become aware of foster farms?
Foster Farms, it's a company. Growing up in California, you know of foster farms. I remember as a child, there were those commercials where they had those stuffed chickens and they were frozen, but they were trying to pretend to be Foster Farms chickens, but Foster Farms was we're fresh, not frozen, and yeah. So I've just always known about Foster Farms.
So just commercial memory from your childhood.
Yeah, like how you know of Nike,
Okay. And I suppose maybe jumping forward in time a little bit, how did you first focus on foster farms as part of your work as an advocate for animals?
So, excuse me, back in 2018, a couple other investigators were doing an investigation into a Foster Farms turkey farm, and they needed someone to do video and photography to document the conditions there, and they asked me if I could go, and I went. That was the first time.
Okay. And just in the interest of time, from that time period, that first investigation in 2018, before the events of September 28th, 2021, how many investigations into foster farms were you a part of, or at least learned directly about?
I've been a part of 5
Okay.
investigations at 5 different facilities.
Okay. And tell the jury what you learned about foster farms throughout those investigations.
It doesn't matter where I go, what year I go, it just doesn't matter where, when. I'm always going to find horrific animal cruelty and neglect at foster farms. All the facilities are filthy, the air is horrible, there are dead birds littered all over the ground, being eaten by maggots. I've found birds unable to walk, unable to reach food and water. I've found birds with broken legs, wings, huge gaping wounds, this big gaping wounds that had obviously been there for days, probably longer. Just abuse and neglect. I found a chick stuck in a feeder that I struggled to get free. Thankfully, I was able to get the chick free, but then I walked a few feeders down and there's a dead chick in a feeder. I mean, it's just horrific.
Okay. Sounds like those experiences left a pretty impactful mark on you.
Yes.
Now, you learned of all these sort of horrific conditions at whatever foster farms facility you went to. Before September 28, 2021, what did you or Direct Action Everywhere try to do about it?
We compiled all of the cruelty footage, and we had Bonnie Clapper, who's an attorney. We had her write a letter, and we sent it out to all sorts of authorities. We sent it to the governor, the DA, the sheriff, the attorney general, and yeah.
Okay. And if I can approach your witness.
You may.
I'm approaching what was previously been marked as Defense 201. Ms. Santurio, what did I just hand you?
You handed me the letter that Bonnie wrote.
Okay, and when was that letter written?
It was written in August. I'm sorry, August 2021.
No, that's okay. And were you familiar with that letter around the time it was written?
Yes.
Okay. And had you read that letter around the time it was written?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I should say. I took most of the photographs in the letter.
Okay. And is that letter a fair and accurate representation of the letter that was in fact sent to authorities in August of 2021?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this point, we would move to admit Defense Exhibit 201.
Objection, hearsay.
Objection sustained.
Okay. Are you aware of if there was any response or investigation as a result of the letter that was sent to authorities?
No, there was none.
Now, you mentioned you had sent letters to authorities multiple times, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. I am now approaching with Defense Exhibit 202. Now, what did I just hand you?
You handed me the letter that Bonnie wrote in November of 2022.
Okay. And what does that letter discuss?
Objection, hearsay.
Objection sustained.
I can rephrase. Is that one of the letters that DXC's direct action everywhere sent to authorities about perceived animal cruelty at foster homes?
Yes.
Okay. And are you familiar with that letter?
Yes.
Had you read it before?
Yes.
Had you read it around the time that it was written and sent to authorities?
Yes.
Objection, relevance. Is the date after the alleged incident.
Okay, sustained.
Was there any, to your knowledge, any action done by authorities in response to that letter?
Objection, relevance, and
Your Honor, it goes to the credibility of law enforcement's investigations to repeated animal cruelty complaints and the lack of action.
permission, objection in request to approach.
All right, Ms. Santurio, I'm going to approach with what's been marked as Defense Exhibit 205. I can go ahead and take these back from you.
Counsel, can I have a copy of that?
I provided you a copy of Discovery, but
Oh,
here, let me grab you another copy. It is the letter from the law professor.
I emailed you. Oh, when you asked me for the.
Are you good? I've got copies, don't worry about it.
We just need to know what 205 was, because we weren't there for the markets. Thank you.
Okay. All right, sorry about that. So, Ms. Centurio, what did I just hand you?
You handed me the legal opinion that Dr. Alvaron wrote.
Okay, and just by way of background, who is Dr. Hadar Avram?
Objection, Your Honor. That does not call to her personal knowledge. It goes to qualifications of knowledge.
I was asking who the person is that wrote the letter.
This is limited purpose evidence, so it can only relate to what she knows or was aware of.
Yeah, limited to her personal knowledge and limited to background as opposed to qualification.
Well, I can rephrase. Do you know who Dr. Avram is?
Yes.
Okay, what do you know about who Dr. Avram is?
I know that she is a leading expert in her field. She specializes in criminal law, animal law. She's won many, many awards, and she's written books. She's well regarded within the law community. And she's also a law professor at UC Hastings.
Okay. And you mentioned this is a legal opinion. When was this, well, I guess let's take a step back. How did this legal opinion sort of come into being? How did you get a copy of it? How did you become aware of it?
Direct Action Everywhere's legal team got this opinion, and then it was circulated throughout the organization and discussed in the organization.
Okay, and when was this?
This was in 2018.
Okay. And with respect to Direct Action Everywhere, when the legal team is sort of given documents, did you become aware of it?
I'm sorry, could you repeat?
That was a really bad question on my part. How did you personally become aware of this letter?
Like I said, when Direct Action Everywhere's legal team got the letter, it was discussed in the organization. We've discussed it many times, so I don't remember the exact first time I heard about it. It's just something that's discussed.
Okay.
It's important to us.
Okay. Have you read this letter?
Yes.
And you mentioned it was in 2018 when you first read this letter. Was it, when approximately did you first read this letter?
I believe it was probably shortly, this is dated May 17th, and I think it was around spring, summer, so it was probably in May.
Okay. And is this the type of letter that you've only sort of read once, or have you read it multiple times?
I've read it many times over the years.
Okay. Generally, what does that letter tell you?
Essentially, what the letter means to me is that there's certain emergency situations where you can rescue an animal, and that's lawful. If an animal is suffering, and by you rescuing this animal, you're not going to create a greater harm, then you are acting within the law. And Wayne Hsiung touched on this, but how I think of it too is I do think of it like you can rescue a dog in a hot car, but I can't rescue a sweater from a hot car. And she goes on to...
Okay, a second. What's the objection?
The objection is testimony is this is limited purpose only to the state of mind of the defendant. This is not a legal opinion, and that needs to be made clear that this only goes to the state of mind and after the court to admonish the jury.
Your Honor asked what the letter meant to her, and she's simply describing it to the jury as to her state of mind.
Sure. But ladies and gentlemen, let me just comment a little bit. The letter, I know, is being discussed. You're not going to receive a copy of the letter for legal reasons. Do not speculate as to why you're not receiving that letter. But the witnesses may rely on that letter based on their reading of it and their understanding of it as a basis for their action in this case. Okay? So you are to consider the testimony only for the purposes that they rely on that letter and to what extent they relied on that letter. But the contents of the letter itself is not being admitted for legal reasons. Okay? And you're not to speculate as to why the letter itself is not being admitted.
And I'll just sort of rephrase so we can be efficient here. It's my understanding from what you've testified, is it your belief that the letter sort of dictates conditional circumstances in which it would be lawful to rescue a suffering animal?
Yes.
Okay, and does that letter go into detail those specific circumstances that could trigger that justification?
Yes.
Okay. And is this a letter that you relied upon on September 28th, 2021?
Yes.
Why did you rely upon the advice given in this letter?
Because she lays out why animals should be, after reading this and what she wrote, I'm trying not to do what he objected to. So she lays out reasons for why, with a necessity defense, animals should be considered. Because in the, and so when I read it, because in the necessity defense, it says, someone's.
And
okay.
and just focus on what your belief was.
Okay, so
and why you relied on that letter.
Okay, I believe that animals were suffering, and based on certain circumstances, if it's an emergency situation, I'm allowed to go and give aid to animals. I'm allowed to give animals food and water, and I'm allowed to rescue suffering animals because of what it says in the letter.
And is it your opinion, what you take away from that letter, does it give you sort of free reign to take whatever animal you want?
No.
Is it
No.
more conditional?
Yes.
Okay. Now I want to sort of direct our focus back towards Foster Farms. Late summer 2021, did you happen to learn anything about the conditions inside the Foster Farm slaughterhouse?
Objection relevant.
Your Honor, it goes to her state of mind, her intent, her knowledge. This is the slaughterhouse that is at issue in this case.
Chickens were taken before they actually arrived at the slaughterhouse on objection relevant.
And it goes to her reasonable belief about the lack of care and the animal cruelty that these suffering birds would likely be subject to based on what she saw from the footage that she viewed in the slaughterhouse.
And that goes to an excluded defense, Your Honor.
Right.
And Judge, that was not excluded. We can have a sidebar if the court would like.
Well, the objections sustained, we're talking about the 2 chickens here, so let's focus on the 2 chickens here, and the batch of the 2, where 2 chickens were taken from.
And Your Honor, if we could approach.
Okay?
Ms. Santurio, we're going to jump ahead a little bit in time.
Okay.
So I want to talk to you about September 28th. Now, we've already talked about what you did on that day, but let's go into a little bit more detail. What were you doing on September 28th outside of the Foster Farm slaughterhouse in Livingston, California?
There was a protest there.
Okay. And what did you do?
When we arrived, we saw that there was a slaughter truck or a transport truck stopped, so we rescued Ethan and Jax.
Okay. Now, why did you run up to that slaughter truck?
Well, I believed there were suffering animals on the truck, and so we were running up to see, and if there were, we were going to rescue them.
Okay. Why did you believe there were suffering animals on that Foster Farms transport truck?
From investigating foster farms for so many years, but also I've spent a lot of time at slaughterhouses. I used to host vigils where we would, peacefully stand on the sidewalk and bear witness to the animals going inside. So I've seen the conditions that chickens arrive in on these transport trucks, and it's not good.
Okay. And you were here obviously during Mr. Hernandez's testimony, correct?
Yes.
Now, when Mr. Hernandez said that it's a frequent occurrence that birds die in transport, did that surprise you?
No, not at all.
Okay. Now, as you went up to that foster truck, as you went up to that transport truck, what could you see?
I could see filthy cages with lots of chickens crammed inside. Like you said, we were, kind of like jogging up past it, so I didn't.
I think you can keep going.
Okay,
The deputy's got us.
Okay. Yeah, so you had asked me what I saw, right?
Yes.
That's what I was, yeah, so I saw just, filthy cages, a lot of feces, and just chickens crammed inside, and, I didn't inspect them very carefully as I was running along the side of it.
What did it smell like?
It's hard to explain the exact smell, but it's just a really strong, gross odor. I guess it just smells like feces and filth and death, and you smell it before you even see these trucks. It's just such a strong smell.
Okay. And you run alongside the truck. We've all seen the video. What do you do next?
We opened up the cage door, and immediately I saw Ethan on the floor of the cage, and his legs were splayed out to the side, which is not normal. They should not be out like that. His comb was incredibly pale pink, and I knew he was sick and he was suffering, so I scooped him out of the cage.
Okay. And we've seen the video. You're not there for a particularly long amount of time. How could you make that conclusion so quickly?
Well, my experience with chickens helps, of course, but I don't think it takes you a long time to notice that someone's injured and someone needs help. If I see, a cat with a broken leg on the street, you see them immediately, and again, that's what I did at Rescue Ranch.
Okay. And did you think that Ethan's suffering was going to get appropriately addressed had he gone inside that slaughterhouse?
No.
Why?
I had seen footage from inside the slaughterhouse, and I knew what happens to sick birds or injured birds if they even catch them, because the line speeds are going so fast.
What happens to them? That you saw from the videos?
They get violently thrown onto the cement floor. For some reason, then workers come back up. Sometimes they'll pick them back up again off the floor, and then they throw them against the shackles. They grab them by their necks, by their wings. I mean, just violently thrown. So they were basically just going to be thrown on the ground. Other dead birds are thrown on top of live birds. They're buried alive. It's very disturbing.
Okay. And before we move on from the videos, just briefly, you mentioned you watched some. Are we talking about like a minute or two of videos? How much footage did you watch from inside that slaughterhouse?
It was roughly a couple days worth. I was reviewing some of the footage, and it was honestly making me like physically sick. It was too much, so I had to stop. But we had about 2 weeks worth of footage. I reviewed at least a couple days worth.
Okay. So you mentioned scooping up Ethan. Why did you think it was okay to pick up Ethan and take him from that truck?
Because of the legal opinion by Dr. Hadar Avaram that I had read, I believed I had a right to rescue Ethan.
Okay, why? What specifically about Ethan made you think that that opinion applied here?
Because he was sick and he was suffering and he needed help.
If he wasn't sick and suffering, do you think that opinion would have applied?
No, it wouldn't have.
Now, subsequent to scooping up Ethan, and we see in the video you run back to the car, what happens next with Ethan and Jax, the other bird?
We went back to our Airbnb and we did like a health assessment, and then we gave them some medicine and gave them some food and water.
Okay. And generally speaking, with respect to both birds, how did they appear to you after you took them from the truck?
They both appeared very, very sick. Like I said, Ethan had the splayed leg issue, but they both had trouble standing or walking for any length of time. Also, these are the breed of chickens that these are. They're Cornish cross chickens. And Cornish cross chickens have been bred over the years by the industry to like always be hungry. So they eat a lot of food and they grow really quick. So then they're bigger when they're slaughtered. So, so they make more money with the bird in less time. But so Cornish cross chickens, they love food. They'll eat all of their food. I have 2 Cornish cross chickens at home, and you give them their food, and they'll like peck at the little tiniest crumbs in their dish for like a half an hour. But so anyway, we gave Ethan and Jax food. We had to physically carry them to the food because they couldn't walk to it, and they did eat for a little while. A little while they were pecking at it, but they didn't finish their food, and then they just didn't really have any interest after that first initial feeding, which is just, again, I can't stress how unusual that is for this breed of bird. So that's really alarming about their health.
Did they appear more like the healthy birds that you would care for, or the sick birds that you identified?
They were the sick birds. Yeah.
I'm going to approach what's been marked Defense Exhibit 203. Now, what did I just hand you in that envelope?
I believe should I open it?
You can if you'd like.
I mean, it's the USB drive that I sealed and initialed.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you've already jumped ahead of me.
Sorry.
You mentioned there's a USB drive. What's on that USB drive?
There's 3 videos that were like the videos after with Ethan and Jax at the Airbnb.
Okay. Was it that same day or the same afternoon?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it was the same afternoon.
Okay. And did you review those videos?
Yes.
Okay. And are you in those videos?
I think I'm in one of the videos.
Okay. And are you present for all of the videos?
Yes.
Okay. And having reviewed those videos, having either been in them or present when they were made, do they fairly and accurately represent what they captured of Ethan and Jax on the day that you rescued them?
Yes.
And after you reviewed those videos, you already mentioned it. Are those your initials on the envelope? Your Honor, at this point, we would move to admit exhibit, I believe it's 203.
Yes.
Thank you.
People have no objection.
People have no objection.
Okay, 203 is received.
All right. So what happened next with Ethan?
They went with Celeste, another fellow animal caregiver. She took Ethan and Jax to another Airbnb, and she was caring for both of them. And then a few days later, Ethan passed away. And I guess I should back up because so she had called me, his health was deteriorating a lot, so they were gonna bring Ethan to me so I could care for him. So it wasn't, they didn't have 2 chickens, which was a lot of work. But then that night or something, I forget the exact timeline, he passed away and died. So they brought me, they brought Ethan, I don't know why I keep saying they. Celeste brought me Ethan's body, and I took him to UC Davis for a necropsy.
Okay. And taking him to UC Davis for a necropsy, why did you take him to UC Davis for a necropsy?
Because that's what I do when a chicken dies. I want to see why they died and what was going on with them and what was wrong with them and what caused their death.
And I'd like to approach with Defense 204, which is a copy of the necropsy. Now, what did I just hand you?
You handed me the necropsy.
Is
Correct.
that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say from UC Davis.
Okay, and is that the necropsy you just talked about after Ethan passed away?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would move to admit Defense 204.
Any objection?
No objection.
All right, 204 is received.
Okay. Now, just a few final questions. When you saw Ethan, did you think he was suffering?
Yes.
Did you think he needed help?
Yes.
Did you think he was going to get any help to alleviate his suffering if you didn't act?
No.
Why did you rescue Ethan?
Because he was suffering and he needed help and it was the right thing to do.
I have no further questions.
All right. Cross-examination.
Yes. Yes, Your Honor. This is you who in the video behind you, you are the woman on the left, correct?
Yes.
And the person on your right is your co-defendant. And
Yes.
you were jogging in this clip, correct?
Yes.
You had to act quickly to rescue these chickens, correct?
I was acting quickly, yes. Yeah, I was worried.
Were you worried about being caught?
I don't know what I would say. Well, yes, yeah. Yes.
Continue the video. I pause the video again, and this is you pulling down the door. And up to this point, you have not seen Ethan nor Jax, correct?
Honestly, I'd probably have to see the whole thing. I don't know how open the door is, but immediately when the door opens, I saw Ethan. So I just can't tell from that clip, I'm sorry.
But you could not see Ethan nor Jax until the door was open, correct?
Yes, yeah, it's a metal door.
I'm continuing to play the video.
I got it.
footage I displayed, both Ethan and Jax appear to be alive, correct?
Yes.
Now, at the time, you were aware that this was a Foster Farms truck, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And that the chickens were coming from Foster Farms Ranch, correct?
Yes.
And that they were going to a Foster Farms facility, correct?
Yes.
And you did not want Foster Farms to use that chicken, correct?
I wanted to help a chicken that was suffering and needed aid.
That was not my question. At the time, you did not want Foster Farms to be able to use this chicken, correct?
At the time, all I was thinking about was that there are chickens suffering on this truck. I want to go and see if they are, and I want to help them if they are. That's all I was thinking. You saw it's very fast.
You wanted to prevent Foster Farms from being able to harm this chicken, correct?
Yes, I didn't want the chicken to be abused anymore. That's true.
And you are a proponent of right to rescue, correct?
Yes.
Yes. And you believe if the right to rescue means you can take animals from companies like Foster Farms, correct?
So the right to rescue is, we believe if we see an animal in need that is sick and being abused and neglected, in certain situations, we have a right to rescue that animal.
And you are wanting to change the law, correct?
To
Relevance of her desire to change the law?
Permission to approach.
Okay, hold on a second. Restate your question, I wasn't sure.
And you want to charge or change the law, correct?
And my objection is the relevance of her desire to change a law. I'm not sure how that's relevant to the elements of the defenses being presented in this tribunal.
Objection overruled.
I would like more animal protection laws. I think everyone wants animals protected.
But you want to enshrine this a right of rescue into law, correct?
Yes.
You say in your direct testimony that you focused on Foster Farms, correct?
Yes.
You do not like Foster Farms, correct?
I don't like the criminal animal abuse that they are getting away with and they continue to do. So Foster Farms they have chickens, and while these chickens are in their care, I believe they have a right to treat them a certain way. And no one's investigating them and no one's stopping this abuse.
Please try to only answer my questions.
Oh, sorry.
But you do not think that Foster Farms, as it currently is or operates, should exist, correct?
Objection, I'm not sure what her belief about whether foster farms should exist, how that's relevant. I also think this goes beyond the scope of the direct or the cross.
Objection overruled.
So I don't think foster farms should exist?
Yes, as it currently is.
Yeah, no, they should not be able to criminally abuse animals and get away with it. For sure, as it currently is, it shouldn't exist.
And since you've focused on Foster Farms, you've done a large amount of research on them, correct?
Oh, I've done some.
Are you aware that the Livingston facility of Foster Farms had been certified by the American Humane Society at the time for over 8 years?
Objection calls for facts, not in evidence, confrontation.
Overruled.
Yes, I am.
So do you believe the American Humane Society certification is wrong?
Objection, it's not the American Humane Society, it's the American Humane Association in your own briefing, respectively.
Sorry, the
It's
American Humane.
Association, not the Humane Society of the United States. It's a different organization.
Sorry for misspoking. American Humane
Association.
Association.
So what was the question again? I'm sorry.
So do you believe the American Humane Association certification is wrong?
Yes.
And this, you're saying, and this association certification has no value to you?
We predominantly investigate farms that have been humanely certified, and we find time and time again that there is animal cruelty going on that no one else is doing. I don't like doing investigations, but no one else will investigate these places, and the truth has to get out there.
Yeah. Now let's go back to the vets. And you said you know a large amount about chicken and diseases, is correct?
Yes. Well, I know some. I'm not a veterinarian.
Right. And you're aware of diseases that can be passed between chickens and humans, correct?
Yes. Some.
And at the time on September 28, 2021, you were not wearing gloves, correct?
Correct.
And you were not wearing a mask, correct?
Correct.
And you had not taken any biochemical process precautions before you did this, correct?
Biochemical? Or, do you mean biosecurity?
Sorry, yes, biosecurity precautions.
Yes, so we actually did. We cleaned out the car, we sprayed, disinfected the car, we washed and dried our clothes, we sanitized our clothes, wore clean clothes, and showered before we went.
And you were aware there's going to be a protest that day, correct?
Yes,
And you knew that there was a plan to stop the traffic to the facility, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, this goes beyond the scope of direct. Also, don't understand what the relevance of a separate protest might be.
General rule.
I knew there was gonna be a protest at Foster Farms, yes.
And you were aware that trucks heading into that facility would be stopped, correct?
Objection, Your Honor, may we approach?
Yes. All right, Mr. Attwell, you want to restate your question?
Yes. You were aware that the trucks were going to be stopped, correct?
I knew it might be a possibility, yes.
And you had brought a camera with you, correct?
We had a camera.
And you were aware that camera was filming you the entire time this event was taking place, correct?
Yes.
Now, you cared for these, after this, you cared for the chickens for a while, correct?
Well, myself, I was only with them for the one day. The next morning they left.
But you're aware, but for that day, you helped take care of these chickens, correct?
Yes.
And you like these chickens?
Yes.
You value these chickens, is correct?
I love these two chickens, but value, no. Unfortunately, these chickens, they're a liability. They cost quite a bit of money.
Oh, that was not my question.
The question was, do they have value?
And she answered your question.
But it's true, these chickens have emotional value to you.
Like I said, I love the chickens. I love chickens, I adore chickens. But sick chickens are a liability. They cost hundreds, if not thousands of dollars. Cost me personally, hundreds, if not thousands of dollars.
But you willingly spend this money on these chickens, correct?
Yes?
Now, you indicated that Jax was able Jax lived, correct?
Yes.
Did you ever return Jax to foster farms?
No, they were sick. I don't believe foster farms would want them back.
But Jax recovered, correct?
Yes, months later, he did, much to our surprise, but thankfully he did.
And despite this recovery, you did not make any attempt to have Jax return to foster farms, correct?
I'm sorry, I just misunderstood the beginning of that.
Despite Jax's recovery, you did not do anything, no attempt was made to return Jax to foster farms, correct?
Well, after the first day, I didn't have Jax anymore, but I don't think so. I don't think there was any attempt. And again, I don't think foster farms would have wanted a sick chicken back.
But you who did not attempt to return, or
Objection asked and answered for the third time.
assisting. And as far as you're aware, Jax has not been returned to foster farms care.
Again, asked and answered for the fourth time.
Assisting. Do you want Jax to be returned to foster farms?
No.
Why not?
When Jax was in foster farm's care, he was sick, he couldn't walk, and he was on the brink of death. I wanted to rescue an animal that was suffering. Jax now is much older and larger than the weight of a chicken when foster farms slaughters them. I wasn't trying to steal something of value from foster farms. I was trying to simply help and rescue a suffering, sick animal that would have ended up on the slaughterhouse floor or in a garbage can.
But Jax is now a much larger chicken, correct?
I believe so.
And Jax has survived this long, correct?
Yes.
And Jax is no longer carrying any diseases, if Jax even had any.
Objection, this is testifying in the form of a question with the prosecution's comment.
Sustain. Let me rephrase. Okay. Jax no longer is sick, correct?
I don't know if he's still carrying infectious bronchitis virus. Again, like I said, I'm not a veterinarian, but the studies are, it varies from study to study how long a chicken can carry that virus. So I don't know. I've been told that he lives in a sanctuary with other jeopardized chickens, who have health issues, who can't be around the main flock. I learned that he lives in this quarantine space, and that's where they all live together, because we don't know if he's still contagious or not.
Okay. Now, based on what all you've learned over the last year and a half since who since you did this, and if you're in the exact same situation again, and would you do it again?
Objection, relevance.
Sustained.
Your Honor, may we be heard, may we approach?
I think what we're gonna do is we're going to take breaks for the day, and then, well, Mr. Attwell, do you have, how much more do you have left of this witness?
And just have one thing, Your Honor.
Oh, just one thing? Okay, we can wrap it up. Okay.
The one thing being discussed, Your Honor, in my court's rule.
Good. All right, yeah, I'll allow you to open up after, after further discussion. If
Understood.
you need to. Okay. All right, so what we're gonna do then is, ladies and gentlemen, there are three questions here. One is from Jury 11, and the other two, I don't have your juror number, so I need to give back to you, and you can write your juror number there so we can properly identify who is.
Judge, can we briefly approach?
Yes.
Sorry.
And then we'll talk about the questions later.
Then never mind.
Yeah, no, I'm not gonna answer the questions now.
Thank you.
I'll give you the questions, we'll talk about it, and then tomorrow we can decide whether those answers can be answered.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, all right. The clerk will make copies of these questions for counsel, 3 copies. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's at the 40:30 hour, and so we're gonna go and break for the day. Tomorrow, remember, we're not gonna start again until 1:30, okay? And so, again, just remember the court's admonition not to form any opinions, come to any conclusions at this point, not discuss the case among yourselves, conduct any research, talk to anybody about the case. In particular, I would just caution you that this case has media interests. And so, please, do not, if you happen to just inadvertently come across any news report or commentary, whether it's on social media or on TV networks or on newspaper, please do not read them, do not open them up, do not discuss them, do not look at them. If you would do that, it would cause a whole mistrial. There'll be a mistrial, we'd have to start all over again, all right? So be very cautious about what you read about this, particularly anything about this case, okay? With that, I'm gonna go ahead and excuse you for the
Issue of whether or not she made an honest or good faith mistake. Her belief now, at this point, would in fact go directly to that issue. So I understand we had a discussion at the sidebar, but I'm putting this on the record, so that should be a completely fair question asked in the limited circumstances of this trial.
Good. Mr. Caraway, I think you disagree.
Yeah, I think the court's made its ruling, it's an appropriate ruling. I can tell the court, I do a lot of things I think I'm right about, and I changed my mind a few years later. It's no different. It's about her intent at the time, and not what she has later, what she later may be thinking, and that's the entire focus of this case. People change their minds, people change their opinions, but even if her belief at the time was wrong, even if she has a different belief later, it's irrelevant. Did she have a good faith belief at the time? And it is what it is. I think the court's ruling was correct.
Let me review the jury instruction against 34.2, if I can remember. Or 34.12. Yeah, 34.2. 34.7.
I'm sorry, Your Honor, what was it 34.4?
It's 3411, I think.
Oh, that's
Actually, misspoke. It does say good faith mistake about the law. so I apologize for that.
Apologize, what was counsel apologizing?
Oh, I did not recall correctly what the instruction says. It does say good faith mistake about the law. I thought it said, probably from a different jurisdiction, a good faith belief in the lawfulness of the action, so I apologize for that.
And Judge, during this discussion, we can waive Ms. Santurio's presence so she can run to the bathroom, if that's okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Questions, Ray? Well, the question is, did she make an honest and good faith mistake about the law? I don't know, we establish what the law is.
Specifically, the law of theft, what the defense is offering the defense that they believed it was legal because of necessity. Now, the court has ruled necessity is not a defense, so there by that very nature, that is if it's believed, it's a mistaken belief in the law. So then the question of do you believe that was a mistake should be valid on that basis alone.
In many ways, the question they're hoping to answer with this witness is the question of this tribunal. It's up to the jury to determine under the factual scenario that is being envisaged in this case, whether there was a reasonable good faith belief or not, or even, not even a reasonable good faith mistake about law, but whether the defendants were actually entitled to take the action they took. There are so many different grounds upon which a defendant could have been entitled to take the actions they took, including value, intent, various defenses, and all that stuff opens up a huge can of worms for us to go down.
Well, when we ask you, you believe that was a mistake, I think that it's just, you know, it goes to the ultimate question for the jury. I think you can ask, what does she believe? And she's answered that. I think that's already been asked. What was her honest and good faith belief? And she's already testified to that. And then the jury can draw from that what they want to do. So I think if you're asking, did you make a mistake, I think that's probably goes to the ultimate question of law. So, yeah, court's decision stands. Anything else you want to put on the record?
Do we want to discuss the questions today or tomorrow?
Let's discuss it tomorrow.
Thank you.
Okay. Understood. Yeah, you can, in fact, why don't you talk among yourselves and see if you can agree on the question that can be just, if you can agree, we can talk about that and make things easy. If you can't agree, obviously it works off.
We'll try to confer via email over the
see if you can confer them.